On a stormy night in Savannah, Georgia, Edward Carter, a 41-year-old fashion CEO known for his luxury empire and lonely heart, opens his door to fate. A 13-year-old delivery boy, drenched from rain, drops a birth certificate. One glance, and Edward freezes. His name is on it. The boy, Sam, is his son. Memories flood back of Victoria, the vibrant designer he met in Charleston 13 years ago and never saw again. Edward learns Sam and his twin brother Isaac are struggling to care for Victoria, now battling late-stage cancer. Worse still, Victoria had tried to reach him for years, blocked by Edward's own assistant, who assumed she just wanted fame. Determined to make things right, Edward moves Victoria to the best hospital, welcomes the twins into his historic mansion, and discovers Sam dreams of becoming a designer, Isaac an illustrator. But just as their fragile family begins to heal, Victoria's greedy uncle resurfaces, demanding custody of the twins, hoping to exploit Edward's wealth. With DNA proof and Victoria's notarized wishes, Edward fights back in court, revealing the truth, even as his old assistant confesses to hiding the past. The judge rules in Edward's favor, uniting the family. Months later, the trio opens Stitch and Soul, a fashion cafe showcasing their journey, and above the entrance, Sam's birth certificate, framed like a second chance. Will one stormy night lead to a lifetime of love? Subscribe to see this heartfelt story unfold. Rain lashed the windows of the Carter estate, a grand old mansion tucked beneath moss-draped oaks on the quiet edge of Savannah. Inside, Edward Carter sat alone in his study, the storm outside mirroring the silence in his heart. At 41, he had built the Carter Atelier into a global fashion powerhouse, tailored runways in Milan, Manhattan flagship stores, his name whispered in glossy magazine halls. Yet, not a single light in the house felt warm. The fireplace crackled, but he didn't look up. His phone buzzed, another interview request, another gala invitation. He silenced it. The rain was more honest than the praise. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. He blinked. At this hour, in this weather? He opened the heavy front door just as a flash of lightning lit the porch. A soaked delivery boy, barely a teen, stood trembling in a hoodie 2 sizes too big. His bike leaned against the gate, wheels spinning in the wind. "You, Edward Carter?" the boy asked, breathless. Edward nodded slowly. "Yeah." The boy reached into his jacket and fumbled with a plastic bag. He handed over a slightly damp takeout container, and then, oddly, a piece of folded paper, almost slipping from his fingers. "You dropped this," Edward said, handing the container back. "No, I meant to give that," the boy replied, nodding at the paper. "It was in the bag. It's for you." Before Edward could ask anything else, the boy turned and sprinted toward his bike. The wind shoved against him as he disappeared down the drive. Edward stepped inside, closing the door against the storm. He unfolded the paper. His eyes froze. It was a birth certificate. Name of child: Samuel Carter. Date of birth: August 17th. Father's name: Edward Carter. He stood there, the room spinning slightly. His name. On this. He read it again. Samuel. His son? No. It had to be a mistake, but he remembered. Charleston. 13 years ago, a fashion gala. The rooftop show under string lights. The woman in the red velvet coat with hand-painted cuffs. Victoria. She was bold, unfiltered. A fashion student with ideas louder than any fabric. They had spent a weekend together, wild and messy. But his career called. He left. And he hadn't thought about her since. His hands trembled. The boy, Sam, looked maybe 13. He sank into the nearest chair, the paper still clutched in his hands. The fireplace crackled. A gust of wind howled. And suddenly, the silence in the mansion wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. Edward stood abruptly and walked to the hallway mirror. His reflection stared back, shaken. He hadn't imagined it. His name was there, in legal ink, on a child's document. He picked up his phone, fingers hovering. Who could he call? His lawyer? His assistant? No, this wasn't a press issue. This was something else. The doorbell rang again. He froze. Opening it, he found the same boy, Sam, standing there, breathless again. I forgot, Sam said, pulling another slip from his backpack. My brother, Isaac, he told me to give you this too. It was a drawing, a pencil sketch. Edward's breath caught. Two boys, side by side. One was holding a sketchbook, the other scissors and thread. And behind them a tall man in a suit looking down with what looked like pride. On the back, scribbled in small, hurried letters. Mom says he was kind once. Maybe he still is. Edward stared at the boy. Who are you? He asked softly. I'm Sam, the boy said, voice lower now. Samuel Carter. My mom's name is Victoria. She's sick. Then he turned and ran again. This time, Edward didn't stop him. He stood there, the sketch in one hand, the certificate in the other. The storm surged around him, but he didn't move. For the first time in years, something had broken through the silence. Not a scandal, not a rival, a boy with his name, a drawing with his hope. And the door, just slightly, beginning to open. The storm raged long after Sam disappeared down the street. Edward stood in the foyer, soaked paper in one hand, the sketch in the other. His fingers ran across the edge of the drawing. Rough pencil lines, soft shading. Two boys and a father. It wasn't just a plea. It was a picture of what could have been. Sleep didn't come that night. The next morning, clouds still hung heavy over Savannah, dripping onto cobblestone streets and rusting iron gates. Edward sat at his kitchen table, suit unbuttoned, eyes fixed on the birth certificate spread out beneath a warm cup of untouched coffee. He pulled out his phone and searched for local food delivery services. Narrowing it down, he found a small company called Riverfront Eats. Their rider profiles were public. Sam Carter, 13. Student, bike courier. One sibling listed, Isaac Carter. His thumb hovered over the contact form, heart pounding. He didn't know what to say. How do you ask a child if you're really their father? Instead, he opened his notes app and typed one name, Victoria. The name felt heavy. He leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes, letting the memories come. It was Charleston, a Fashion Week mixer on a rooftop, lights strung between wood beams, wine flowing, laughter carried on the sea breeze. She walked in wearing a jacket made of repurposed silk scarves, stitched like stained glass. Her smile was mischief, her voice raspy from too much coffee and late-night sewing. "Who let you in here looking that original?" he'd joked. She smirked. "Who let you in here looking that expensive?" They talked for hours. About design, about soul, about why fast fashion was soulless and stitches should tell stories. He stayed in Charleston for 3 days longer than planned, and then he left. No call, no letter, no goodbye. Just another career milestone waiting in Milan. Edward blinked hard, snapping out of it. He reached for his phone again and this time tapped on the Riverfront Eats number. A woman answered. "Riverfront Eats, this is Dana." "Yes, I'm trying to get in touch with one of your delivery boys, Sam Carter." There was a pause. "Sam? Is there a problem?" "No, not at all. He dropped something last night. I'd like to return it. He doesn't have a phone. His mom doesn't like him carrying one, but I can tell her to call you if you'd like." "Yes, please. Tell her it's Edward Carter. She'll know who I am." He gave his number and hung up. An hour later, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered quickly. "Hello?" A woman's voice. Soft, worn. "Edward?" He swallowed. "Victoria?" A silence followed, heavy. "I never wanted to do it this way," she said quietly, "but I didn't know what else to do. I didn't know, Victoria, I swear." "I tried," she whispered. "I emailed. I called. Your assistant. I guess you thought I wasn't worth your time." He closed his eyes. "I never saw any of it." "Of course you didn't." Another silence. "Can we talk?" he asked. "In person?" A pause. "I'm at Memorial Hospital, room 214. "Are you okay?" "I'm not dying yet, if that's what you're asking," she said with a faint laugh. "But I don't have time to wait anymore." The call ended. Edward stood. He looked down at the sketch Sam had given him, now placed in a silver frame on his table. The only picture in the house with people drawn close together. Outside, the storm had passed. But inside him, something deeper had just begun to stir. He grabbed his coat, the framed sketch and the birth certificate, and walked out the door. The hallway smelled of antiseptic and lemon cleaner. Edward stood outside room 214 of Memorial Hospital, hand clenched around the framed sketch Sam had given him. His heart thudded in his chest, not from nerves, but from something deeper. Regret wrapped in guilt, wrapped in something he hadn't named yet. He knocked gently. A voice called from inside, raspy but steady. "It's open." He stepped in. Victoria lay in the hospital bed, thin, pale, but unmistakably the same woman from that night in Charleston. Her eyes met his, soft with exhaustion, yet sharp as ever. "You look like you stepped out of a magazine," she murmured, a wry smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Edward offered a faint smile. "I didn't come here to impress." "Then take off the suit jacket. You're making the IV lines nervous." He removed the coat and sat beside her. For a moment they said nothing. Then she broke the silence. "So, now you know." He nodded slowly. "I saw the certificate, and the drawing. He looks just like I did at that age." She turned her head toward the window. "Isaac has your stare. Sam's got your stubbornness." Edward's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried, Edward," she said gently. "I emailed. I called. I left messages with your assistant." He looked down. "I never got any of them." She smiled sadly. "I figured that out eventually. She probably thought I was chasing your money." He shook his head. "That's not fair. You deserved a reply. You deserved more than silence." Victoria leaned back, eyes fluttering closed for a second. "They're good boys. Smart, kind, and tired. They've been working, delivering food after school to help me with rent. Isaac sketches when he's not biking. Sam sews with a machine I bought off a pawn shop shelf." Edward's throat tightened. "They shouldn't be struggling like this." "Well," she said, opening her eyes again, "life doesn't always wait for comfort." He looked at the IV drip, the slow beeping from the monitor next to her. "How bad is it?" he asked quietly. "Stage 3. Lung cancer. I started chemo last month, but it's been rough." A long pause. "I can help," Edward said. "I want to help." Her eyes flicked to him, doubtful. "Help? How?" "I can move you to the Carter Oncology Center. Best doctors in the region. Private rooms. Top treatment." She raised an eyebrow. "Just like that?" He nodded. "Just like that." "And the boys?" "I want to know them. I want to support them. I don't expect to earn trust overnight, but I want to try." Victoria blinked back a tear. "They've drawn you for years, you know, even before I told them who you were. Isaac once said, 'I think I dream about him. He wears suits like the people in the movies.'" Edward pulled the framed sketch from his bag and set it on the table beside her. "Sam gave me this. I framed it last night." She looked at it for a long time. "They still believe in you," she whispered, "even though they don't really know you." "Then let me earn it," he said. "Not through gifts, through time, through presence." Victoria nodded faintly. "Start by taking them to school tomorrow. They bike 6 miles, rain or not." "I will," Edward said. "And maybe afterward, we get lunch, the 3 of us." Another silence stretched, softer this time. "Edward?" "Yeah?" "Don't disappear this time." He reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "I won't." Morning mist hung low over the Savannah rooftops as Edward parked his car on a narrow street lined with faded duplexes and cracked sidewalks. He spotted the boys instantly. Two figures with backpacks too big for their frames, walking their bikes toward a nearby crosswalk. Sam glanced up, saw the sleek car, and froze. Edward stepped out, dressed not in a suit today, but jeans and a navy jacket. "Hey," he called gently, careful not to startle them. "Need a ride?" Isaac narrowed his eyes. "Mom didn't say you were coming. She asked me to take you to school, if you're okay with it." Sam looked at his brother, then at Edward. "We usually bike." "I know," Edward said, "but maybe one day of rest?" Isaac hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine. Just don't touch my sketchbook." Edward smiled. "Deal." They loaded the bikes into the trunk, climbed in, and the silence in the car was thick but not cold. Edward watched them in the rearview mirror, Sam looking out the window, Isaac flipping pages in a worn sketch pad. "What are you drawing?" Edward asked. Isaac looked up. "A jacket." "Can I see?" Isaac hesitated, then passed it forward. The sketch was sharp, precise, lines full of movement and edge. Edward whistled low. "This is really good." "I want a design for athletes," Isaac said. "Stuff that moves with the body, but still looks good." Edward nodded, handing it back carefully. "You've got talent." Sam leaned forward. "I sew his ideas sometimes. We have this old machine. It jams, but I make it work." Edward glanced at him. "You sew?" Sam nodded. "Mom taught me." Edward smiled, emotion tugging at the edges of his face. "Remind me to show you something when we get home." "Home?" Sam echoed. Edward paused. "I mean, after school. My place, if you want." Neither boy answered, but Edward caught a flicker in Sam's eyes. Hope. At the school curb, they stepped out. Edward leaned across the seat. "I'll pick you up at 3?" Isaac shrugged again, but this time the resistance was softer. "Thanks," Sam mumbled before shutting the door. Edward watched them walk inside. He exhaled. At noon, he returned to their apartment. Bare brick, peeling green trim. Victoria opened the door slowly. She was still pale, but upright. "You actually took them." "I said I would." She smiled faintly, then stepped aside. Inside, the place was small, clean, worn. "Sit," she said, easing into the armchair. "How'd it go?" "They're brilliant," Edward said, pulling out Isaac's sketch and unfolding it. "You raised them well." Victoria's eyes softened. "They raised each other more than I like to admit." He handed her the sketch. "They need space, tools, a future." She nodded. "And money." "I'm not here to throw money at them, Victoria," he said gently. "I want to be here, present, active, not a check." She studied him for a long moment. "Then start by feeding them. They haven't had a proper dinner in 2 weeks." His jaw tightened. "Done." That evening, Edward picked them up. At his house, the twins stepped into the foyer wide-eyed. Isaac's gaze darted to the framed sketch on the entry table, his brother's drawing. "You kept that?" Edward nodded. "It reminded me who I needed to be." Sam looked around. "This place is huge." "It's just space," Edward said. "What matters is what we do inside it." He led them to the dining room where dinner was set. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans. Sam stared like it was a mirage. "You sure this is for us?" he whispered. Edward placed a hand on his shoulder. "Yes, Sam. You belong here." Isaac pulled out his sketchbook. "Can I draw in here?" "Anywhere you want," Edward said, voice steady. And as the boys ate and sketched beneath the soft chandelier light, Edward watched quietly. This wasn't just redemption. It was the beginning of something real. The next morning, Edward arrived at Memorial Hospital just after sunrise. The city was still quiet, bathed in pale gold light. He walked the now familiar corridor to room 214, a bag of fresh clothes and books in one hand, hope in the other. Victoria looked up as he entered. She was sitting up straighter today, but the oxygen tube still curled around her cheekbones. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the water glass. "You didn't have to come again," she said, though her voice was softer than before. "I wanted to," Edward replied, setting the bag down gently. "I brought your favorite tea, chamomile and mint." She blinked. "You remember that?" "I remember everything about that weekend," he said. "The rooftop, your scarf jacket, your laugh." She smiled faintly. "Those were good days." He sat beside her. "I need to ask you something, Victoria. Why didn't you tell me in person? Back then?" Her gaze shifted to the window. "Because you made it clear the runway came first. I didn't want to beg to be part of your schedule." "That wasn't fair to you," Edward said, remorse in every syllable, "and not fair to them." Victoria sighed. "I wanted to do it on my own. For a while I managed. Then the coughing started. The weight dropped. I had no energy to fight both cancer and pride." Edward nodded. "I understand." A long silence followed. Then she looked at him. "Do you really want to be in their lives? Or is this just guilt?" He didn't hesitate. "It started with guilt, but now it's more. Sam told me about his sewing. Isaac's sketches are better than some of my junior designers. They deserve opportunity. They deserve a father." Her fingers rested on the blanket. "And what about your life? Your company? This isn't just a side project, Edward." "I know that," he said. "That's why I'm making changes. I've already handed off more control to my COO. I've canceled my Europe tour." Her brows rose. "You canceled Fashion Week for us?" "I canceled Fashion Week because I finally found something that matters more." A tear slipped down her cheek. He pulled a folder from his bag. "And I want you to have this." Inside were admission papers for the Carter Oncology Center. Room reserved, transport arranged, bills prepaid. She stared. "This is a private center. Edward, I can't—" "You can," he said. "You're the mother of my children, and you deserve to fight with every weapon available." Victoria pressed the papers to her chest, her fingers trembling. Outside the door, there was a knock. Sam poked his head in, Isaac just behind him. "Hey, Mom," Sam said. "We came to visit before school." Isaac added, "I brought you something." He stepped forward and handed her a folded sheet of sketch paper. She opened it slowly. It was a drawing of her, curled up in bed, two boys sitting beside her, a man in a jacket, holding her hand. She looked at Isaac. "Is this supposed to be your father?" she asked. Isaac glanced at Edward. "No, Mom, that's Edward." Victoria looked over the drawing again, her throat catching. "Do you two want him to stay in your lives?" she asked gently. Sam stepped forward. "He makes us feel like maybe we're not alone anymore." Edward's chest tightened. Victoria reached out and took Edward's hand. "Then I guess we're in this together." And, for the first time since the storm, the room felt warm. 2 days later, Edward sat behind his office desk, fingers tight around the arms of his chair. The skyline of Savannah stretched beyond the tall windows, but his focus was locked on a screen showing rows of archived emails. Victoria's name popping up again and again, flagged unread. He turned toward his assistant, Meredith. Her hands were clasped in her lap, her gaze flickering. "You said she never reached out," Edward said quietly. Meredith shifted. "I thought she was just another woman trying to ride your name. I didn't want you distracted." "You thought hiding my children from me was protection?" he said, voice shaking. "You deleted every message she sent, every call. You erased their existence." Meredith's voice trembled. "I'm sorry. I thought I was helping you." Edward stood. "You weren't. You nearly cost me my family." She lowered her head. "I understand if I've lost your trust." "You haven't lost my trust, Meredith," he said. "You've lost your job." Her lips parted, but he turned away. Later that afternoon, Edward walked through the garden behind his home where Sam and Isaac were sketching beside the fountain, their notebooks balanced on their knees. Sam looked up as Edward approached. "Did something happen?" he asked, reading his face. Edward crouched beside them. I found out the truth. My assistant, she blocked your mom's emails. She assumed the worst without knowing anything. Isaac frowned. So, Mom wasn't lying? Edward shook his head. No, she never lied, and I should have questioned why I never heard from her. That's on me. Sam looked down. We thought maybe you just didn't want us. Edward placed a hand on his shoulder. I didn't know, but now that I do, I want nothing more than to make up for that time. The boys were quiet until Isaac reached into his sketchbook and pulled out a folded sheet. I made something last night, he said. It's not perfect. He opened it to reveal a design, a 3-panel storyboard. The first, a boy in the rain, holding a birth certificate. The second, a man opening the door. The third, all 3 of them sitting at a table together. Edward stared at it. Sam said quietly, We're calling it a stormy start. Isaac's idea. Edward's throat tightened. It's beautiful. He stood and motioned toward the house. Come with me. I have something to show you. Inside, they followed him to the back of the mansion, where tall double doors led to a sunlit room with white walls, tall windows, and brand-new work tables. Bolts of fabric lined the walls, sewing machines gleamed on clean surfaces, and a wall-sized pinboard stood empty, waiting. Isaac blinked. Is this? Edward nodded. This is yours, your studio. For every idea you've got inside you that needs space to breathe. Sam walked to a machine and ran his hand along it. This is industrial grade. I used the same model when I first started, Edward said. Thought it was time someone else did something even greater with it. Isaac turned slowly. You really want us to design here? Every day you want to, Edward said. If it matters to you, it matters to me. Sam hesitated, then pulled something from his pocket, a thread spool, old and half empty. This was Mom's first thread from her student kit, he said. She said never throw it out. It helped her pass her final sewing exam. He placed it gently on the corner of the work table. We'll keep it here, he whispered. So she's part of it too. Edward nodded, eyes damp. That's perfect. And, as the 3 of them stood there, surrounded by fabric, light, and something that felt like healing, Edward knew. The damage was real, but so was the rebuild. The sun rose slow over Savannah's live oaks, their long shadows stretching across Edward's lawn. Inside the mansion, the boys were already awake, their sketch pads open, fabric swatches spread like puzzle pieces across the table. Edward stood in the kitchen watching from the doorway, coffee cooling in his hand. Morning, he said, stepping in. Sam looked up and grinned. We figured out how to sew the collar detail on the red jacket. Want to see? Of course I do, Edward said, setting down his mug. But first, there's something important I need to talk to both of you about. Isaac looked up, sensing the shift in tone. Is it Mom? Edward shook his head. No, she's doing well at the center. The doctors are optimistic, but someone else showed up. Who? Sam asked slowly. Your great-uncle, Victoria's uncle, George. Isaac blinked. We've never met him. There's a reason for that, Edward said. Victoria cut ties with him years ago. He has a long history of controlling behavior, gambling debts. But now that he knows you exist and that I'm involved, he wants custody. The boys exchanged a glance. Sam stood up straighter. He doesn't even know us. Edward nodded. That's what I told him. But he's hired a lawyer. Isaac stepped closer. What if he wins? He won't, Edward said firmly. I'm already preparing for the possibility of a legal battle. I've spoken to Victoria. She's writing a notarized letter expressing her wishes. And we're doing a DNA test to establish paternity officially. Sam's voice dropped. Do you really want to fight for us? Edward knelt down so he was eye level. I would go to war for you, both of you. I didn't get to be your dad from the start, but I won't lose that chance now. Silence filled the room. Then Isaac reached into his sketchbook and tore out a fresh page. He drew quickly, 2 boys standing in front of a lion. Behind them, a man holding a shield. Across the bottom he wrote, "Protectors aren't always born. Sometimes they arrive." Edward swallowed hard. "Can I keep this?" Isaac nodded. That evening, they visited Victoria at the cancer center. The private suite was quiet, the hum of machines barely noticeable. She smiled weakly as they entered, her color slightly better. "You bring an army with you?" she joked as all three sat beside her. Edward leaned in. "Victoria, we need to talk about George." Her smile faded. "I knew he'd show up. I'm going to file for custody, full legal rights." She studied his face. "Do you want this? Really?" "I need this," he said. "Not for control, for protection, for stability." She nodded slowly. "Then you need the truth. I wrote you more than just emails, Edward. I sent letters. I left voicemails. But Meredith, your assistant, screened everything. She blocked my number. She told me years ago that you weren't interested. She even threatened me with legal action if I tried again." Edward froze. "She told you that?" Victoria's eyes filled. "I still have one of the voicemails she left." Sam gripped Edward's arm. "She tried to keep us apart." Edward stood abruptly. "I need that recording. It could help us in court." "You'll have it," Victoria said. "But promise me one thing. Don't let George anywhere near them. He only sees them as leverage." "I promise," Edward said. "He'll never take them from you, or me." Sam reached into his backpack and pulled out the thread spool again. "We're keeping this close," he said. "Just like Mom told us. For strength." Victoria smiled through tears. "That spool's been with me since college." Edward took it, gently placing it in his blazer pocket. "Then it's going with me to court." And, in that moment, the room wasn't a hospital. It was the heart of a family, fragile, mending, and stronger than it had ever been. Afternoon light poured through the tall windows of the studio, bouncing off the white walls and illuminating bolts of fabric in every hue. Sam stood over a sewing machine, lips pursed in concentration, guiding a vibrant cobalt blue piece beneath the needle. Across the room, Isaac was hunched over a sketch pad, headphones on, scribbling a new design in rapid strokes. Edward leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, watching them work. They didn't notice him at first, lost in their flow. Then Sam looked up. "Hey, you're just standing there." Edward chuckled. "Didn't want to interrupt greatness." Isaac pulled off his headphones. "I'm working on something new. Want to see?" Edward stepped closer. Isaac flipped the sketch pad toward him. It was a matching brother set. Jackets with asymmetrical zippers, subtle embroidery of a lion's head on the sleeve. Edward nodded slowly. "The detail, work. That lion. Where'd that come from?" Sam looked up. "It's based on what you said in court, about protecting us." Isaac thought the lion made sense. Edward felt the words catch in his throat. "It's perfect." Sam held up the half-finished jacket. "It's the first thing I'm sewing where I didn't mess up the collar." "You didn't just not mess it up," Edward said, walking over. "You nailed it." Then he pulled something from his pocket, a small box. "I have something for you both." He opened it. Inside were two polished silver pins shaped like the lion Isaac had drawn. Isaac whispered, "Are these real?" Edward nodded. "Custom made. You're part of this brand now. These are yours, your signatures." Sam picked one up gently. This feels real." "It is," Edward said. "You're not just visiting my world anymore, you're shaping it." That evening, as the house settled into quiet, Edward found the boys in the living room. Sam was flipping through a fabric book, and Isaac was shading a cape onto a model figure. "I've been thinking," Edward said, lowering himself into the armchair. "We're not just going to design anymore. We're going to create something lasting." Sam raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "A line. Your line. Kids who've gone through hard things, who don't have much, who think fashion isn't for them, will make clothes for them. Affordable, real, powerful." Isaac sat forward. "Can we call it Threadline?" Edward smiled. "Even better." Just then, the doorbell rang. Edward stood, a flicker of caution in his chest. When he opened it, a courier handed over a manila envelope, legal documents from George's lawyer. Inside was a formal notice, a custody petition filed under Georgia state law, claiming the boys had been taken without permission. Edward stared at it, jaw tightening. He walked back inside and handed the envelope to Isaac. We knew this was coming, but now it's real. Isaac looked down. What do we do? Edward placed a hand on each of their shoulders. We fight. The next morning, Edward took the boys downtown. His lawyer, Carmen Green, was waiting in a tall building with glass walls and quiet confidence. She greeted them warmly. I've seen the paperwork. It's weak, but we need to prepare. Edward nodded. Victoria's notarized letter will be ready tomorrow. And the DNA results? Expected by Friday, Carmen said. I'll also subpoena your former assistant. Her testimony is crucial. Isaac looked up. You think he's just doing this because we're with Edward now? Carmen's gaze softened. I think your uncle sees dollar signs, but the court will see truth. On their way out, Sam looked at Edward. If we win, can we start the studio for real? Like, open it? Edward smiled. We'll do more than open it. We'll make it roar. And just like that, two boys walked beside their father into the storm of a courtroom battle, but with lion hearts and thread spools of hope. A week later, Edward pulled into the driveway of the boys' old apartment complex. It felt surreal coming back here, where Sam had first dropped the birth certificate in the storm. He stepped out, scanned the familiar courtyard, then climbed the creaky wooden stairs to Unit 3B. George opened the door before Edward knocked. Tall, silver hair slicked back, expensive watch on his wrist. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Well, well, the fashion mogul himself, finally brave enough to face me. Edward stayed calm. I came to make things clear, George. You're not getting custody of Sam and Isaac. George crossed his arms. I'm their blood. Their guardian by law if Victoria passes. I've got the paperwork. You're not their guardian, Edward said, handing over a folded copy of Victoria's notarized letter. She revoked any prior arrangement you had years ago. She spelled out her wishes clearly. The boys stay with me. George read it, scoffed. This letter doesn't mean much in court. It will when paired with the DNA test, Edward replied. I'm their biological father. The results came in this morning. George paused. And what makes you think a judge will favor you? You barely knew them. I knew them before you even remembered their names. You never visited, Edward said, never called. You just waited for the right moment to cash in. George's jaw tightened. Careful. I'm not scared of you, Edward said, voice low. You didn't come for them. You came for my bank account. George stepped closer. You think money scares me? I've seen more zeros than you know. Edward held up the lion pin, glinting in the sunlight. Then you'd understand what legacy really means. And this is theirs, not yours. He turned and left. Back at the mansion, Sam and Isaac waited in the studio. Isaac was stitching fabric onto a mannequin torso while Sam ironed lapels. Edward walked in, shoulders heavy. Was it him? Sam asked. Edward nodded. Yeah, he won't stop. Not yet. Isaac looked up. Then we won't either. Sam added, We're with you, whatever happens. Edward approached, pulled out the lion pin again, and placed it on the sewing table. This is more than a symbol now. It's our promise. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Victoria called from the cancer center. I heard George filed a formal challenge, she said, her voice tired but steady. Yes, Edward answered. But I've got the documents. Your letter, the test results. Carmen's prepping everything. There was silence, then her voice cracked. I never wanted it to come to this. I know, he said gently, but we're ready. We've got truth on our side. She exhaled. Just take care of them, Edward, no matter what. I will, he said. I swear to you. Later that night, Isaac knocked on Edward's study door, holding something behind his back. I want you to see this, he said, stepping in. He handed Edward a folded piece of muslin fabric. Stitched onto it was the lion's head, but this time with a crown and 2 stars above it. "I'm adding this to our first jackets," Isaac explained. "The stars are for me and Sam. The crown is for you." Edward stared at it, speechless. "You don't have to wear it," Isaac mumbled. "But I wanted you to know. We see you." Edward reached out, touched the stitches. "You didn't just see me, Isaac. You saved me." And in that quiet moment, under the hum of the desk lamp, something unspoken passed between father and son. Not stitched in thread, but in love. The courtroom loomed like a cathedral. High ceilings, marble floors, and a weight in the air that silenced even whispers. Edward sat at the front table, Carmen by his side, a stack of documents carefully arranged before them. Across the aisle sat George, smug in a dark suit, flanked by a lawyer who looked more like a bulldog than a man. Sam and Isaac waited outside with a family advocate, nervous but hopeful. Edward glanced at the envelope in his hand. Inside, the original thread spool Victoria had given him, now kept in a protective sleeve. He slipped it into his breast pocket, close to his heart. "Ready?" Carmen asked quietly. Edward gave a slow nod. "Let's bring them home." The judge entered, elderly but sharp-eyed. The proceedings began, formalities, introductions, and then the back and forth. George's lawyer stood first. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. George Callahan, is the maternal great-uncle of these boys. He seeks legal custody on the grounds that their mother is gravely ill and their current living arrangement, while comfortable, was formed without proper guardianship procedures." Carmen rose. "Your Honor, we submit Exhibit A, Victoria Callahan's notarized letter clearly stating her wish that Edward Carter, the boys' biological father, care for them." She handed it to the bailiff, then added, "And Exhibit B, official DNA results confirming Edward Carter is the biological father of both boys." The judge reviewed them, eyes narrowing. George stood abruptly. "She was under stress. You can't trust a sick woman's wishes. I was family from the start." Edward stood slowly. "You never showed up, George. Not once. Not when they were hungry. Not when she was diagnosed. You waited until I stepped in." George scoffed. "Easy for a millionaire to say. This isn't about love, it's about power." Edward stepped forward, voice steady. "Then let me speak plainly. I didn't know about them for 13 years, but the second I found out, I changed everything. They're not a headline or a project to me. They're my sons." He pulled the thread spool from his pocket, holding it up. "This belonged to Victoria. It helped her pass her final exam when she had nothing but talent and determination. She gave it to our son as a symbol of strength. And now, I carry it as a promise. I won't let anyone break the family we're building." The room went still. The judge leaned forward. "And the assistant who intercepted the mother's emails?" Carmen called the witness. Meredith took the stand, her voice low, eyes remorseful. "I thought I was protecting Mr. Carter. I deleted messages from Victoria. I even called her once and told her to stop reaching out. I'm deeply sorry." The judge nodded solemnly. "That will be noted." George stood again, flustered. "This is ridiculous. This man's only been in their life for weeks." Edward turned to him. "And you've never been in it at all." The judge tapped her gavel once. "I've heard enough." Everyone fell silent. "In this case," she began, "we must weigh blood, intent, and history. Mr. Callahan, you may share biology through Victoria, but not effort, love, or presence. Mr. Carter has not only provided for these children, he has bonded with them, supported their talents, and, above all, respected their mother's wishes." She paused. "Custody remains with Mr. Edward Carter, effective immediately." Edward closed his eyes as relief washed through him. Outside the courtroom, Sam and Isaac ran to him as soon as they saw his face. "Well?" Sam asked, breathless. Edward crouched, pulled both of them close. "We won, boys. You're home for good." Isaac whispered, "Mom's gonna be so happy." Edward smiled, then pulled the thread spool from his pocket again and handed it to Sam. "This belongs to both of you now. Take care of it." And under the late afternoon sun, as courthouse shadows stretched long and warm, Edward Carter held his sons. Not as a visitor or a stranger, but as their father, finally. 3 days after the courtroom decision, the mansion was alive with quiet joy. In the kitchen, Sam sliced strawberries while Isaac adjusted the collar on a mannequin nearby, tweaking the jacket he'd finished the night before. Laughter spilled from the hallway. Edward, holding up an oversized World's Best Dad apron the boys had sewn themselves. "You two are something else," Edward said, slipping the apron over his dress shirt. "It even has pockets." Isaac grinned. "One for measuring tape, one for snacks." Just then, Carmen called. Edward put the phone on speaker. "You won't believe this," she said. "George tried to appeal the ruling, but it was denied. Permanently." Edward let out a long breath. "Thank you, Carmen, for everything." "There's more," she added. Meredith, the assistant who deleted Victoria's emails, filed a sworn affidavit. "It confirms everything." The judge added it to the official record. Edward looked to the boys, his voice softening. "That means no one can ever question how this happened. It's all documented. The truth." Sam tilted his head. "Will Mom know?" Edward smiled. "She already does." That afternoon, they visited Victoria together. She lay in her private room at the Savannah Oncology Center, sun pouring in through the wide windows, flowers blooming on the sill. Victoria opened her eyes as they entered. Her smile was faint but radiant. "Hey, my boys," she whispered. Isaac rushed to her side. "Mom, we brought you something." He opened a folder and pulled out a framed copy of the court ruling. Beneath it, a sketch he'd drawn of Victoria in one of his future runway looks. It wasn't flashy, just elegant. Her essence captured in lines and soft shading. Victoria's eyes welled. "You made this?" Isaac nodded. "It's from my first collection. I named it Legacy." Sam held her hand. "You're the reason we dream at all." Edward stepped forward, placing the thread spool gently on the windowsill beside the flowers. "You gave me everything I never knew I needed." Victoria blinked slowly, her voice rasping. "You're a good father, Edward." He knelt beside her. "I'm trying to be." Then Victoria whispered, "I kept that birth certificate for years, hoping, praying you'd care one day." Sam leaned in. "I dropped it by accident, remember?" Victoria chuckled. "Best accident ever." Later that night, back at the mansion, Edward sat in his study, flipping through old sketchbooks. He paused at one. The first one Sam had used. Inside was a rough design of a jacket, lopsided, poorly proportioned, but full of heart. On the back page was a scribbled note, "One day, I'll make Mom proud, even if I don't know Dad." Edward's hand trembled slightly. He got up, crossed the room, and framed that page. He hung it just above his desk, next to a childhood photo of himself, back when he believed success would fill the hole inside him. Now, that hole was gone. In its place, 2 boys, a woman with unwavering strength, and a new life stitched together with second chances. Downstairs, Isaac called out, "Dad, come see what Sam made." Edward descended the stairs to find Sam holding a custom patch, freshly embroidered. It was the lion again, but this time standing beside a smaller cub. "What do you think?" Sam asked. Edward's eyes shone. "I think it's perfect." And in that simple moment, as the 3 of them stood beneath the golden chandelier in the foyer, Edward realized something. Family wasn't always planned. Sometimes it was delivered in the middle of a storm, with a birth certificate and a second chance. 3 weeks passed, and life inside the Carter mansion had shifted from silence to laughter. One morning, Edward stood in the kitchen, flipping pancakes in his apron as Isaac sketched quietly at the breakfast table. The boys had started calling him Dad more often, softly at first, then with growing comfort. That morning, though, it came with a tug. "Dad," Sam said, holding a folded piece of paper behind his back, "we have an idea." Edward turned, spatula in hand. "Oh?" Sam unfolded the paper. A full concept. A cafe with fashion decor, a menu inspired by design themes, coffee drinks named after fabrics, pastries styled like runway accessories. Isaac added, "We want to call it Stitch and Soul, a place where design meets comfort food." Edward read through the sketches, stunned. "You drew all this yourselves?" They nodded. "And the theme?" "It's about blending what we love," Sam explained. "Fashion, food, and home." Edward blinked, the word home settling somewhere deep. Sam pulled something else from his pocket, a copy of the birth certificate. "We want to frame this in the entrance. It started everything." Edward's throat tightened. He set the spatula down. "I think it's time," he said. "Let's build something together." 3 months later, Stitch and Soul opened on a cobbled corner in downtown Savannah. The old brick storefront had been transformed. Sunlit windows, sleek signage, and a door painted robin's egg blue. Inside, it was part bistro, part gallery. A mannequin in the center wore Sam's first real jacket. Framed sketches from Isaac lined the walls like artwork. Fashion books, thrifted sewing machines, even bolts of fabric decorated the shelves. But near the door, under soft lighting, was a glass frame. Inside, Sam's crumpled birth certificate. It read, "Father, Edward Carter," and beneath it, a simple brass plaque. The beginning of everything. Opening day was packed. Reporters showed up, curious about the CEO's pivot. Former employees, neighbors, friends, and in the back corner, Victoria, dressed in a sleek lavender wrap Sam had made, beamed as if she were 10 feet tall. Carmen whispered to Edward, "You should say something." Edward stepped onto the small stage near the counter. He glanced at his sons, then at Victoria. "This place wasn't my idea," he began. "It was theirs." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I spent my life building fashion for the world, but forgot to build it for the people I love. Sam and Isaac reminded me what matters. Victoria reminded me what endurance looks like." He paused, tapping the glass frame beside him. "This piece of paper," he said, "used to feel like a storm. Now, it's a compass." Victoria smiled softly from her chair. Sam stood, his voice steady. "You gave us a roof. You gave us your name. Now you gave us a future." Isaac added, "We're just getting started." That evening, long after the last guest left, Edward locked the doors. The three of them sat on the floor, eating leftover cake from paper plates. "You boys ready for round 2 tomorrow?" Edward asked. Sam grinned. "Ready for every day after." Edward looked around the room, at the patchwork of their hearts stitched across every detail, and for the first time in years he felt whole. Not because of his company, not because of the praise, but because of this place, this family, this beginning. 3 months after the courtroom verdict, the corner of Whitaker and Taylor buzzed with new life. The former tailor shop, once shuttered and forgotten, had been reborn. Sunlight poured through the tall windows, catching the soft shimmer of silk curtains and vintage fashion sketches hung with care. Outside, a hand-painted wooden sign swayed gently in the breeze. Stitch and Soul. Inside, the scent of fresh croissants and strong espresso mixed with the sound of laughter. A small crowd gathered around the counter where Edward, in rolled-up sleeves and an apron, poured coffee like a seasoned barista. Beside him, Sam adjusted a mannequin wearing a bold red jacket stitched from his own design. Isaac sat nearby, flipping through a sketchbook as he refined the dessert menu's layout. At the center of the entrance stood a framed birth certificate. Its paper edges were still creased. The ink faded slightly from rain that night. But above it, engraved in gold foil, were the words, "Every stitch starts with a thread." It had become their motto, not just for the cafe, but for their family. "Sam!" a young girl called from the door. "Did you really design the uniforms?" Sam grinned. Sure did. Want to see the next collection? He led her to the back room where rolls of fabric waited, eager to become something more. Meanwhile, Edward stepped back, watching his son's work. His phone buzzed, a message from one of his senior designers in New York. They wanted him to return for Fashion Week. For a moment, he stared at the screen, thumb hovering over reply. Then he turned it off. Not this year, he whispered to himself. This is where I belong. Victoria had yet to return to the cafe, still recovering in treatment. But her influence was everywhere. A special tea on the menu bore her name. A corner bookshelf displayed her favorite design magazines. And in the kitchen, her handwritten recipe for cinnamon pecan scones was now a house favorite. That afternoon, as rain tapped softly against the glass, Sam pulled Isaac aside. "We should do something for her," he said. "Something big." Isaac nodded slowly. "Like what?" Sam hesitated, then held up a sketch, an elegant wrap dress in midnight blue with a rose motif stitched into the hem. She loved roses. "We make it. Display it on opening night when she's strong enough to visit." Isaac smiled. "And we sew her initials inside." That night, as they closed up, Edward sat alone in the quiet cafe. He looked at the birth certificate, now backlit by a soft pendant lamp. That paper, once a shock, had become a promise. Sam came up behind him, placing a small box on the counter. "What's this?" Edward asked. Sam shrugged. "It's a pin. I made it in art class. For you." Edward opened the box and found a silver brooch. 2 threads crossed into a heart, with 3 tiny dots stitched beneath. "It's us," Sam said softly. "Me, Isaac, and you." Edward didn't speak. He just reached out, pulling his son into a hug, the kind that made time stop. Outside, the lights of Stitch and Soul glowed warm against the quiet Savannah night. A place of fashion, yes, but more importantly, a place of healing, of family, of second chances sewn together with faith and forgiveness. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Stitch and Soul, casting soft, golden light across the tables and the polished wooden floor. Laughter echoed through the cafe as a customer sipped coffee, admired handmade napkin holders shaped like tiny sewing machines, and snapped photos beneath a mural painted by Isaac, a blooming tree where each leaf was a swatch of fabric from their journey. At the center of it all stood Victoria. Wrapped in a flowing teal shawl, her hair shorter now, thinner, but her smile radiant. She stood beside the birth certificate, her eyes filled with tears. She traced the frame's edge with a gentle hand. "I never thought I'd live to see this," she whispered. Edward appeared beside her, holding a cup of chamomile. "You built the roots, Victoria. They just needed sunlight." She took the tea, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you for watering them." A silence passed. It wasn't awkward. It was full of everything they'd lost, and everything they'd reclaimed. Across the cafe, Sam stood proudly behind the counter, showing a new customer the spring line of embroidered aprons. Isaac sat by the window with a notepad, sketching a new logo, 3 interlocking threads forming a heart. Later that afternoon, Sam tapped a spoon to his glass. "Can I say something?" The room quieted. All eyes turned to him. He took a breath, then stepped forward, holding up the pin he once gave Edward. "When I made this, I didn't know what family really meant. I thought it was just about names on paper, or who paid the bills. But now I know. It's about who stays, who shows up, who forgives." He looked toward Victoria, then Edward, then Isaac. "I used to think we were forgotten, but we weren't. We were just waiting to be found." The room was still. Then, slowly, Victoria walked to her sons. "And I want to say thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "To both of you, for never giving up, for loving me through the worst." Then she turned to Edward. "And to you, for keeping your promise." Edward nodded, emotion thick in his throat. "You gave me a second chance to be a father. I won't waste it." Isaac stepped forward, holding something wrapped in brown paper. "We made you something," he said to Victoria. She opened it carefully. Inside was a framed sketch of the cafe, with the three of them standing outside, her, Edward, and the boys. Above it read, "Stitch and Soul," founded on faith, forgiveness, and family. Victoria pressed the frame to her chest, tears slipping down her cheeks. That night, after the guests left, the family sat under the hanging lights strung across the patio. The magnolia trees rustled in the breeze. "I used to think success was measured in fabric," Edward said, gazing at the stars. "But it's really measured in moments like this." Sam leaned his head on his mother's shoulder. Isaac handed Edward a sketch pad. "We were thinking, maybe our next line should be called the Reunion Collection." Edward smiled. "I'd wear it." Laughter rose again, soft and pure. The cafe lights glowed behind them, and above the doorway, the birth certificate remained, no longer a relic of shock or pain, but a symbol of healing. In Savannah, on a street once dark with rain, now lit with hope, a family found their rhythm again. One stitch, one soul, one stormy night at a time.